Hi everyone, welcome back to Medical Terminology. In this little mini lesson, we're going to talk about anatomical position or anatomic position, directional terms, and anatomical planes. So for anatomical position, when we describe a position, we assume that everybody has the same reference point, and that's really important for consistency's sake. So anatomic position is basically this. Let me get back here. That's it. You've probably seen that position before, right? So basically it assumes that the person is standing upright, they're facing forward, their eyes are forward, and their palms are facing forward, their arms are at their side. That's anatomical position. Pretty straightforward, right? For our demonstration today, we're going to use my son's stuffed animal. This is Foof. Say hi, Foof. He's going to be my demo today, okay? So if Foof is in anatomical position, he is upright, he is facing forward, his arms are at his side, he doesn't have palms, but if he had palms, they would be facing forward, and he would be standing upright. Foof is in anatomical position, okay? All right, now let's talk about some directional terms. So directional terms are usually come in pairs, and they're usually opposites. So the most basic one is left and right. All right, they're a pair and they're opposite, left and right. So I think I mentioned this in a previous video. When we're talking about left and right, it is always, always, always the patient's or the person's left or right, not your left or right. For example, if we go back to Foof, all right, you're looking at him in a video, but which eye has the white spot on Foof? It is his right eye. Okay, so it's always, always, always the patient's left or right. So that's just a quick example. Okay, the next term is medial and lateral. So when we're talking about positions and we're talking about directional terms, we want to assume that the patient has an imaginary line running right down the middle of their body. We'll get back to medial lateral in 1 minute. I'm going to give Foof an imaginary line with this piece of yarn right down the middle of his body. And this is Foof's midline. All right, so can everybody see? Now Foof has a midline. All right, so that's the middle of his body. Okay, so now he has a midline. So when we're talking about medial and lateral, everything that's closer to that midline is considered medial, and everything that's further away is considered lateral. Okay, so if we wanted to say my nose is medial to my ear, right? Because my nose is closer to this imaginary midline than my ears. So my nose is medial to my ear. That would mean then that my ear is lateral to my nose. Okay, so do you see that? So we're always referencing this imaginary midline. All right, so medial means closer to the midline, lateral means away from the midline. Okay, all right, Foof, you stay right there. All right, the next one is anterior and posterior. So anterior means towards the front, all right, this is Foof's front, and posterior means towards the back. All right, so in this case, Foof's belly is anterior and his tail is posterior. Okay, so you could say his tail is posterior to his belly. His belly is anterior to his tail. Okay, ventral and dorsal, these are a little trickier because they're not quite as common, but ventral and dorsal are similar to anterior and posterior. So ventral means the same thing as anterior. Your ventral side is your anterior side. Your dorsal side is the same thing as your posterior or back side. Think of the dorsal fin on a shark, right? That's the dorsal fin of the shark is the back side or the back of the shark that sticks up, okay? That's the dorsal fin. And then the ventral side is the belly side, okay? The next one, the next pair that we're going to talk about is superior and inferior. So superior means above or towards the head, and inferior means below or towards the feet. All right, so in this case, Foof's ears are superior to his shoulders. All right, his ears are superior to his shoulders. So his shoulders are inferior to his ears. Okay, so superior means towards the head or above. Inferior means down towards the feet or below. Okay, so we're comparing two things. Okay, now another pair that's similar to superior and inferior is cephalic and caudal. So cephalic literally means towards the head. Cephalo is the word part meaning head. So cephalic means towards the head, and caudal is a word part. Caud means towards the tail. So we don't use this a whole lot in people. We use it much more in veterinary and animal terms, but we do use it sometimes. So caudal literally means towards the tail. So it can be used similar to superior and inferior, but we don't use it quite as much as we do superior and inferior. So cephalic means towards the head. Caudal means towards the tail or towards the tailbone. Okay. Prone and supine. Prone means laying face down, this way, prone, face down. And supine means laying on your back. Right? So if you're laying face up on your back, you are supine. Prone, laying face down. Okay? And then the last one we're going to talk about is distal and proximal. This one's a little tricky because it's probably not a common one that you've heard before. But distal means further away from the point of attachment or from the origin. And we use this one on your limbs and some internal organs. So it really means towards the origin or the point of attachment. So if you think about your arm, the point of attachment is the shoulder, and the legs, the point of attachment is the hip. Okay, so let's talk about Foof's legs here for a minute. All right, so if we look at his leg, all right, his hip, right, his little hip here, the hip is proximal to the foot. Okay, so the hip is closer to the point of attachment or closer to his trunk than the foot. The foot is distal to the hip. All right, so I'm gonna put two little stickers on here so you can see. All right, so here's a sticker of a pen. Can you see the little pen? All right, and here's a little sticker with books on it. All right, can you see those? So the pen is proximal to the books. It's closer to the point of attachment. The books are distal, they're at a further distance than the pen. All right, so this one is at a further distance, it's distal to this one. This pen is proximal. All right, so some other ways you may have seen or you may hear this combination of proximal and distal is something like an artery from the heart. So if an artery leaves the heart, like the aorta begins at the heart. So the proximal aorta is closer to the heart. The distal aorta would be further away from the heart. So it originates at the heart. So the proximal end would be closer to the heart. The distal end would be the further away from the heart. So that's how we use it there, okay? All right, I'm gonna take Foof's midline off here. All right, and the last thing we're gonna talk about is anatomic planes, all right? So in anatomic planes, what we're talking about here is usually, this applies to like radiography. So for my radiography students out there or future radiography students out there, when we talk about different images of the bodies, we're talking about the way the body is sliced up to view, okay? So different views of the body, we can look at different images of the body, the way they're sliced up. So these imaginary slices of the body, we can look at the body in different images through three basic planes. So let's say I took an image and we sliced the body this way. We sliced it going this way. That's the horizontal plane. If I divide the body this way and I got an upper half and a lower half, a superior and an inferior view of the body. I sliced it this way. So there's a superior portion and an inferior portion. That would be a transverse or a horizontal plane. Transverse or horizontal plane. If I took that image and I sliced it this way, I sliced it down this way, right? Sliced it right down the middle. And I got a right side and a left side, anywhere along this line. Sliced it right down. And I got a right side and a left side. That's called a sagittal plane, all right? If I took them and I sliced this way, I got a right side and a left side. That's called a sagittal plane. If I sliced right down the midline and I got an equal right side and left side, that's called a mid-sagittal plane. If I took my slice and I went right down the top here and I got a front half and a back half, front half and a back half, anywhere along that imaginary plane, front and back, that would be called a frontal plane, also called a coronal plane. Coronal comes from the term for crown. Imagine seeing a little imaginary crown up here, all right? So a coronal plane or a frontal plane divides the body into a front half or a back half, okay? So those are the three main planes described in your book. Another plane that's not described in your book, but you may come across in practice, is one that divides the body into diagonal slices. So if you divide the body this way into diagonals, all right, for different various x-rays. The knee is one that comes to mind right away. That's called an oblique plane. Oblique, O-B-L-I-Q-U-E, an oblique plane. Okay, so that divides the body into diagonal slices. All right, so again, one more time. A transverse or horizontal plane divides the body into an upper and lower portion. A sagittal plane divides the body into right or left halves. Mid-sagittal divides the body into an equal right or left side. And a frontal plane divides the body into a front and back half. All right, also called a coronal plane. All right, so that's it for this mini lesson. I hope you enjoyed it and look for the next one. Thanks.